What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Wednesday night staple episode of Shout at Buffalo Bills Football Podcast, brought to you as always by Tops Friendly Markets. And right now, it's the rush to the Tops Red Zone. Get game day ready with Tops and score big savings, winning recipes, and everything you need for the ultimate game day experience. Head to the Tops Red Zone in store for all your game day essentials and more. Ryan Talbot, it has been a busy news day in Bills land. We're going to obviously start with James Cook here in a minute. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I'm doing better than feels like half the Bills roster right now based on that injury report.
It's crazy because you think like, all right, all the names that missed last week, Taron Johnson still working his way back out. You lose Ed Oliver, Khalil Shakir misses. They get lucky in that, Deion Dawkins is able to play. But now you're looking at the potential. Okay, Shakir's not practicing yet. He's working off to the side today. We don't know his status. We don't know how far that thing's going to come along. Maybe he practices tomorrow, and that kind of offers a little bit of hope for this offense. But without James Cook, potentially, I mean, it is a turf toe injury, foot injury. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but credit to the thigh doctor on Twitter. I think that's his handle. He put out the video from the Cook attempted catch on the second to last drive from the last game, and you actually see Cook's cleat like bend like an accordion. It's a pretty gross visual. And so obviously he didn't play on those last 3 snaps last week. And maybe even, Ryan, that was why the Bills chose not to run it all. I don't know if that played into it at all. Ty Johnson was out there. He had a couple good runs in that game. So I still think running should have been an option. But it looked like a really gruesome injury. So I'm kind of starting this thing off this week is I don't know if James Cook is going to be able to make it back to play, knowing what those toe kind of injuries can end up being a little bit lengthier sometimes.
Right, and that's pretty worrisome where you look at Ty Johnson and Ray Davis being then the 1-2 punch at running back, and the fact that Davis was, essentially demoted based on the snap counts last week. I think he played one offensive snap for the Bills versus Ty Johnson, who ascended back into that number 2 role. That 1-2 punch wouldn't strike much fear into the Jets defense, to be quite honest. And then you're back at square one and being a one-dimensional type of offense. We saw how the passing game looked this past week without Khalil Shakir. And I will say I went back, I watched some of the Texans game, especially that last drive where the Bills threw 3 straight passes. Allen had some guys underneath that he could have targeted, that he could have hit for some 5-6 yard gains. And I know after the pass interference on first down, they were backed up a bit. But there were some guys open. There were some drops. If the Bills, though, have to lean on Allen in the passing game, that's going to be a risky proposition too, based on the fact of how poorly they played 1 week ago.
I think part of what makes Ty Johnson a good number 2 is that he kind of offers a little bit of a change of pace, right? Like he's done, James Cook is fast, but I think James Cook and his shiftiness as a runner is what you really fear. I mean, there's so many times when it seems like he's galloped up in a hole and he bounces out left, out right, finds some kind of open real estate, and boom, he's out for 6 or 7 or 8 yards after that contact. So, I think with Cook out, potentially Shakir out. I didn't even get to Curtis Samuel yet, who's dealing with his own foot injury. We don't know when that occurred in the game. We don't know how serious that is, but Cook and Samuel were on the bikes today. And honestly, Samuel is so far down on the priority list because even with Shakir out last week, he wasn't able to really find any footing. Sorry for the pun there, in this offense and in this game. So where does the offensive production come from in this game? And, you start to look around this offense and probably, if Shakir, say worst case scenario, Shakir, Samuel, and Cook can't go. Now you're talking about Tyrell Shavers getting promoted from the practice squad once again. You're looking at KJ Hamler, who it actually is nice to have a veteran that's on the practice squad that you can kind of elevate. I know there were some, catching issues during training camp in the preseason, but a guy that's at least has some experience in the league that you could kind of throw in there like, okay, What is it going to look like for KJ Hamler? It has not worked to this point with Curtis Samuel. Maybe that's a change of pace. Maybe Samuel can play and you have to kind of figure things out. Mac Hollins was in a red non-contact jersey today. He wasn't a part of Sean McDermott's initial injury report. And I believe we won't get the first official injury report until tomorrow. We'll see if we can learn more about Mac Hollins tomorrow. But he was out of practice. It didn't look like he was too limited. But the fact that, he was in the red non-contact jersey is at least alarming, because now you're talking about a numbers game. Because, Ryan, I went back and watched that game. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, you might as well just not even have the roster spot for him on game days. I mean, he has been so invisible. I mean, there's a couple plays where I noticed him blocking, but whenever he's been targeted, it's almost like, oh gosh, go anywhere else in, the progression. But yeah, they got some problems at wide receiver right now.
Yeah, that might be an understatement for sure, because the bottom part of this roster is leaving a lot to be desired. MVS, that just seems like a waste of a contract. They gave him a decent amount of money. I know, probably not as much as they would have spent elsewhere on a bigger name, but you have to wonder if they're regretting that decision at this point in time, based on where he falls in the pecking order of this depth chart when everyone is healthy, and also just based on how little he has contributed this season as a pass catcher, as a blocker. Supposed to be a guy that could maybe open up things underneath with his speed, and he hasn't been utilized that way either. So he has not fared well. Tyrell Shaver is getting elevated again. I'd like to see him get some looks. That 4th and 5 play, I felt like he was at least open on that play. Obviously, Josh Allen made the right call there, throwing it to Keon Coleman as it went for the 49-yard touchdown. But getting some of these young guys more involved, and Hamler was a futures deal last season, but he's still a young guy too. And if he gets elevated, you got to try to maybe work some of these guys in, because you're right. Curtis Samuel, even before this injury, it hasn't been working, which is maybe one of the most surprising parts of this offense to me, based on the success he had with Joe Brady in Carolina. They have to try to figure something out, though. It might be personnel packages. It might be more 2 tight end sets, which really feels like something they haven't done enough this season. But the offense has to go back to the drawing board to get playmakers and guys that can make plays more involved.
Yeah, we're going to get into a conversation around Dawson Knox in a minute here. There is a 2 tight end set. You mentioned 12 personnel. I forwarded you a clip, one of the best Bills offensive plays. With the Frescas, Ryan. You're killing me with the Frescas.
I know.
They're bad for you. Stop drinking those Frescas.
Know.
Killing me. I'm worried about your health.
Tops, though.
Hey, shout out to Tops. Great deals.
Free.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
We'll have to clip that out. You had a little bit of
little band
flair, a little bit of yeah, there you go, in the voice. We'll get to Dawson Knox. I want to get into a clip. Maybe I could share it here as well. As a matter of fact, I'm going to see if I can upload this now. While I'm doing that, let's get into Ed Oliver and what that potentially means. You have 29 total snaps between Zion Logue and Branson Dean, who came up from the practice squad. Obviously, both of those guys vaulted into a role because Austin Johnson missed the game with the oblique injury. He was limited today in practice. Oliver was out with the hamstring injury. He did not practice today. I saw him walking around in the locker room. We'll see if there's, if he appears out working off to the side. But if he's not out to the side tomorrow, Ryan, I mean, I'm probably expecting him not to be able to be a go again. And as much as the concerns on offense that are there, you don't want this New York Jets offense to find any kind of momentum. It's been so bad for them. You want to put the pressure on them, and not having Oliver to me is a huge issue, because I don't think they did a great job of consistently getting pressure on CJ Stroud. There were moments in the game, and I think Oliver would be a huge beneficial piece. It'll be great to get Taron Johnson back if he gets back to a level where he could play. He's progressing, doing a little bit more work against the bags. He's still in the red non-contact jersey, but not having Oliver against this Jets team, it takes that level of concern up a little bit higher.
Sure. And first and foremost, you'd like to have him there. I know he's undersized, but with this 1-2 combo or attack that they have on the ground, I know Breece Hall has struggled the last 2 weeks. I know that Braylon Allen maybe hasn't been utilized as well as he could, but That's a really good rushing attack. But you want Ed Oliver most of all to get after Aaron Rodgers. This offensive line of the Jets is an absolute disaster, has been bad all season. The last 2 games, Rodgers has taken hits bad enough that it's kind of knocked him to the turf for a prolonged amount of time. A guy like Ed Oliver could really shift momentum in this game with his pressures getting after the quarterback. I just recently did, minutes before this one, a Jets podcast, and I said, this has to be a Greg Rousseau game because the offensive line of the Jets is just so bad that the defensive line needs to win on their own. I know that Sean McDermott, Bobby Babbage could dial up some pressure, some blitzers from the secondary, from the linebacker position, but this is a game where the Bills need to win up front, whether you're talking Ed Oliver at defensive tackle, hopefully if he can be back for this game, or off the edge with a guy like Greg Rousseau.
Rousseau was interesting last game because it wasn't a great game per se. Obviously, he didn't have any sacks, but he did get some pressures. I mean, he was around the quarterback at times. And like I mentioned in the preview show, CJ Stroud is a brutal quarterback to face if you're not going to take him down on first contact. He gets off, gets into that second part of the play. His receivers are built for the scramble drill. Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz, Nico Collins, especially, although he missed most of that game. But I'm totally with you. I mean, Greg Rousseau, I kind of want to see a little bit more. What was the PFF grade on Javon Solomon? I saw a couple plays that I liked, but I don't know how it went overall for Solomon. Do you remember?
I'm going to look right now. I mean, I still have it here pretty much in my feed. So he actually graded out with a 68.7 overall grade, with a 66 pass rush, which I know when you hear those numbers, if you're not familiar with PFF, they don't sound great, but it's in the green territory, which is solid. So he fared well off the edge. You're right. Rousseau had a few opportunities. He did get some pressures. He had one, I think it was a third down play where he hit.
Does it
Stroud
show you how many snaps he had in the game?
Yes.
What was the snap share between the edge rushers?
Yeah, so Solomon had 15 plays, and 13 of them were pass rush. You had 52 for Rousseau, obviously. No surprise there. Smoot had 40, so it played a huge role in that game. Looking further down this list here, Epinesa had 47 and Tuhill had 16. So pretty close split between Tuhill and Javon Solomon in terms of that DN4 type of role.
Interesting stuff. So I think Solomon, the one benefit of this Von Miller suspension, if you're looking at it from a defensive perspective, is Solomon getting kind of thrown in week by week and getting a little bit more playing time. I like Solomon in this matchup because of his speed on either side.
Yeah.
As a speed rusher, like these tackles, you have the rookie in Fashanu who's been thrown in for Morgan Moses. I'm not sure if Moses will be back. You have Smith on the other side who, listen, I don't know his PFF grade off the top of my head, but I've been watching this offensive line for the Jets in a couple of games, and it just hasn't gone well for them. And so I think, if you can get Solomon out there, get him some confidence, get him to affect the quarterback a little bit, that'll be huge. And now all of a sudden teams can't game plan. And I'm not sure if teams are necessarily game planning for Rousseau, but without Ed Oliver and Von Miller, I feel like you're the Houston Texans, you're pushing a lot of your action towards Rousseau. And there was a couple of times where I just feel like, his speed burst off the side, it's good at times, but it's not like a smaller, compact rusher. So a lot of times he was kind of in the area of Stroud. Stroud steps up in the pocket. There's not enough push in the middle, and he was able to kind of operate. It didn't go as well when Nico Collins went out of the game, rightfully so. But, I think that's a concern in this game. Like Aaron Rodgers against Minnesota, that defensive line on the interior made life hell on Elijah Vera Tucker, Joe Tippmann. I mean, they were in his face. And, that Minnesota defense, they have a very interesting defense in that they have that walk-up style where you can't tell who's doing what, who's dropping back in coverage. Flores is really brilliant in the way that he's designed that. And, oh, by the way, look who's eating in that defense right now. Harrison Phillips. Man, having him back would have been, something interesting. I know we were kind of, I was at least a little bit out on him at the number. But the way that he's developed over the last couple of years, like man, he's playing some really good football. I think the Bills miss that third defensive lineman, and that's all while saying Dwayne Carter has come on and given them
Yep.
valuable snaps. But how much better would it be to have Carter in like that fourth defensive tackle spot, and you have like more of a veteran bona fide guy in the 3 spot that I think they were hoping that Austin Johnson could maybe fill, and it just hasn't been the case even when healthy.
Yeah, and Johnson could be back for this game, limited with the oblique injury, but you're right, he has not been a difference maker early on in his tenure with the Bills, and very hit and miss. So once again, this defensive tackle depth is not working out for the Bills. And it's weird because you watch some of these guys after they leave Buffalo. Harrison Phillips is a guy that has played great football in Minnesota, and scheme matters. And the way that Flores, dials it up, I think that obviously matters. But, I've seen Puna Ford have a few nice games already this season. Tim Settle was in that matchup last week. He didn't really do much for Houston, which kind of was the same story here in Buffalo. But the depth last year was a concern at D tackle. The depth this year is a concern. I was very happy with how Dwayne Carter played last week in this extended role with Ed Oliver out. But yeah, the Bills would certainly have benefited if he was more of a D tackle 4 with it more of a veteran presence that can push the pocket, solid against the run and pass.
We've been pretty active this week on the Insider text line. You can join right now by texting 716-528-6727. And I want to give a shout out to anybody watching at home, and of course, all of our Florida insiders. We're sending our thoughts, our love out to all of you guys. I hope everybody in Florida stays safe. Some scary stuff with the weather that's coming in. I was talking to one of our insiders, James, who lives down there in Florida, and just hoping that, the worst of it, they're able to dodge it. So, we're thinking about you guys. We hope everything turns out okay. Some scary stuff with the hurricane.
Yeah, definitely. Prayers out there for all the Bills fans, all of our insiders out there in Florida. I've been kind of monitoring the news on this. Very scary stuff. If you're in the eye of the storm, I know a lot of the people had evacuated, and like today at like 11 a.m. was the last chance, essentially. So our thoughts are with everyone that's out there, whether you stayed, whether you were able to get to safety, hoping for the best for the homes, for everything that, that you have in Florida at this time.
The Shout text line, like I was mentioning before, it's brought to you by Carrie C. Byer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Litro, located at 237 Main Street in Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give Carrie a call, 716-852-1234, or check out litrolaw.com. Ryan, everybody needs to get out their calendar right now, because in 10 days, we are back at Wingnuts, 1402 Millersport Highway. This is going to be our first like tent pole event of the season. We have actually a videographer coming out from Syracuse.com. We're going to put together some marketing material, like a little mini commercial. We're going to have some fun at this one. So this will be a great one if you could fit it into your calendar. October 19th, 6 p.m. is usually when we arrive. 7 o'clock, we usually go live with the show. We hang out before and after. We talk Bills. You can eat delicious wings, get some great beers on taps. They always are, crafting some cool drink specials as well. It's going to be a super fun time on October 19th.
You're just going through it all right now. Wingnuts always love having our live shows there, and it's always extra special when it's the night before a game. We've had a few Fridays before the games type of shows, but this is our first one this season where, night before the Titans game. So join us if you're in town, whether you're traveling in or if you're already just here in Buffalo. My friends from the UK are going to be here, I guess, in Buffalo that weekend. Apparently they have an event at another spot, but hopefully they can also make their way out to Wingnuts.
We cannot wait for it on October 19th at 6 p.m. That's when the party starts. Get that in your calendar. We hope to see everybody out there as well. So, all right, let's get to this tight end situation, because, one of the things I've kind of been harping on the last couple of days is just the invisibility. Is that a word? Invisibility?
Yeah.
Did I make that up? It's a word?
No.
All right.
Listen, visibility is a word. Like an
I like it.
invisibility cloak. Harry Potter, man.
That's where it came from. That's where I knew I was feeling it from. Okay. Sorry, Ryan. It's been a long day. It's just been a long day. So Dawson Knox, where's he been, right? Where's he been in this offense?
Invisibility cloak.
And he's been wearing the invisibility cloak. There you go. I knew I was going somewhere with this. You got me over the finish line, so thank you. And I've been thinking a lot about it because from an organizational perspective, to me, this had to have been more of a priority for Joe Brady. And it feels like through 5 games, there's no urgency to really play around with this personnel package. Like, what kind of creativity can you use? And here's the thing. Check out this video, Ryan. This is the Dalton Kincaid completion that I think was the play before the first touchdown. Set up the first touchdown. And I brought up the all 22 angle and playing it here, Kincaid gets it across the middle. Boom. Great. I'm going to remove this and I'm going to pull it back in here. Okay. I can't restart the clip. Ryan, it's always something, right? Always something goes wrong. All right. So Allen goes back to pass, goes through a couple reads, pump fake, finds Kincaid over the middle. Let's go back to the start of this clip here because I want you to see where they're lined up. So this is Kincaid right here. I don't know if my cursor is working. You probably can't see it. He's in the slot. And then Knox is on the outside, which is something, haven't I been begging for this, Ryan?
Yeah.
Some creativity with the way that they line up their tight ends. You can get creative and get them both out in the formation without either one of them being in line. Because here's the thing, like they're 2 of your more talented pass catchers. So, and in different ways, right? Like Kincaid's more of that, like possession kind of receiver. Knox is a little bit more of that, like physical presence in the passing game. You can get creative, even if you want to line them up. Like it's not always going to be, you got to get separation in both spots. And we saw it on that play. Like Knox didn't get a ton of separation, but there was good protection. Knox was on the outside. If he were to beat his man, or maybe there was some zone coverage, maybe you can get him on the outside and a touchdown pass in the back, however the play ends up materializing, that is a plus play that I feel like if you're Joe Brady, you got to go back to the drawing board and be like, how do we get more of this? And I commend Dawson Knox because I talked to him a little bit today after practice, and I'm like, the key phrase that he always uses, and I actually use this phrase with my kids on the Little League baseball team. We guys over me guys, right? Like that's the marching orders within the Bills, wide receiver room, their offensive meeting room. It's not about you individually, but Dawson Knox has been here for a long time. He's had some big time games, some big time touchdowns. How hard is it to accept this kind of like role where you're not even really involved in the offense? And shout out to our guy, Sid Vicious, Mark, on social media. We connect with him all the time. He called it after the game. I mean, they're using Dawson Knox the majority of the time as an offensive lineman. And that holds up when you go back and you watch the film, the all 22, the replay, however you want to look at it. The Bills are predictable on offense right now because when they have certain personnel packages out there, you almost know what's coming most of the time. Dawson Knox is out there. I'm expecting a run play. And if I'm not expecting a run play, sometimes he goes to block. I saw this on one instance, and then he flares out into the flat there, is wide open because he's coming off the block on almost a screen pass, and Josh Allen didn't see him on that play. So it's like there's all these little pieces to it that's not working. And I think the pressure is now on Joe Brady to answer after teams have maybe caught up a little bit the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much nailed it there in that whole spiel rant about Dawson Knox and the way they're utilizing him. I would not have believed after 5 weeks that this would be a player that would have 5 targets and 3 receptions, Matt. And a lot of it has to do with the usage and the blocking. I get it. He is by far their best blocking tight end. I know that when they're using him on the field, it's for the betterment of this run game, and they've run the ball very well this season, especially when he's been on the field. But you can use that to your advantage now. Like you said, he could pretend to block and then run downfield. It can be a short intermediate area. You need to get him going, though, too, because then it gives defenses another guy to worry about. And it feels like the focus has been on Dalton Kincaid a lot this season, early on against Arizona, triple coverage some plays the way that they're playing him. And now if Shakir misses this game, they're still going to have a lot of attention on Kincaid once again. Okay, well then feed the ball a little bit to Dawson Knox, who, as you mentioned, has been here longer than any of these other pass catchers that Allen is working with. Give him those opportunities, because I know for every frustrating drop that he's made some spectacular catches as well, and he's done some good things after the catch. The Bills are a little bit too predictable right now. You haven't seen the pre-snap motion, which I gets a little bit harder on the road. There's a lot of things that I feel like Joe Brady can do and needs to do to make this offense, not as stale as they've appeared as of late.
I think you get, into like the matchups, right? Like, how do you match up against the team? You've brought in all of these different flavors of players. And I think in some ways, if you're Joe Brady, it's probably hard not to like lean into that and the chess match, right? And I think it's fitting that Josh Allen said today, like, we got to become a little bit more basic. We got to go back to what some of the things we were having success at during training camp and lean more into that. And I think that part of that is kind of like a subconscious message. I don't think he's sending messages to Joe Brady, his offensive coordinator, but it's like, you have all these guys, you know what they can do. Let's kind of keep it simple, because sometimes like they're overthinking things so much. Like there was one point in the game, watching the game back, where James Cook had like 2 or 3 really good runs in a row. And it's like, you get to that 4th play, that 5th play, wherever it ends up being, and you're like, all right, Joe, you're not going to run another run play right here, right? Because you know what's going to come. The defense knows what's coming. The fans know what's coming. The media knows what's coming. And you know what? They run it. It goes for no gain. It completely throws off the momentum of the drive when you could have gotten creative in that moment. See, the creativity needs to come after the first 15 or 20 plays too. And you can't become predictable in how you're calling the game. And that's, to me, is like the biggest knock that I could put on Joe Brady at this point, is that sometimes he leans a little bit too heavily into what's going well. And he forgets about being creative in how, and I'm talking about basic creativity, play action pass. When you're running the ball over and over again, maybe fake it and then try to throw out, find Dawson Knox in that moment, or Dalton Kincaid, or whoever. We're going to get into more about this offense in a minute, but that to me is the biggest improvement that I think the Bills can do in the immediate future here. Run the ball, be a little bit creative with how you build on a successful run game. Even if Cook can't play, that becomes a little bit more of a, difficult task, but Brady's got to be better.
Yeah, 100% has to be better. And, there was the Dallas game last year where they could just keep feeding James Cook the ball and the Bills were running wild. But you're right. Eventually defenses start, putting 8 men in the box. And Cook's actually seen a lot of 8-man boxes this season in terms of the percentage counts against him. And the fact that he still had a good amount of success despite that is really saying something. But when he is running well, yeah, after you pick up a first down on the ground, run a play action the next time when they're maybe expecting you to run the ball again. I would say a screen pass, but I haven't seen the Bills. It feels like they have not had a successful screen pass since like Chan Gailey's been here. For whatever reason, this Bills team doesn't like. I feel like they're the only team in the NFL that cannot run a successful screen pass. So maybe they'll make me eat my words this season. But personnel usage, 2 tight ends, moving some of your players around in terms of their roles at wide receiver, which we can talk about here in a little bit. There's ways to get creative, and it doesn't just have to be pre-snap motion, but I feel like that benefits this team as well. There's a lot that they can do to make life easier for Josh Allen, make life easier for this offense where things have been very difficult the last 2 games on that side of the ball.
Thank you so much for everybody joining us on this baseball filled Wednesday evening. We got the Yankees playing right now. I think the Mets and the Phillies are still going on. So a lot of baseball action on a Wednesday night. We appreciate you spending part of your evening with us. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. If you're watching on YouTube, we really appreciate it. I think we're almost at 12K if we didn't just go over. So that's pretty exciting. The next thing I want to talk about on the offense, and we'll get to a couple more injury updates before we get out of here, but I wanted to spend a minute on this because I really like Steve Smith Sr. In his second career here as a media analyst. I thought he did a great job covering the wide receiver class during the draft process. He spent a lot of time talking about each individual wide receiver, put out a video on all of them. I think it's over on Underdog Sports. He's doing a really good job, and now he's kind of linked up with James Palmer over there. And they put out a 9-minute video today talking about the Bills offense and the struggles that they've had over the last 2 games. Specifically, Steve Smith kind of went in on the Bills for their usage of Keon Coleman. And I'm going to read this quote out really quickly here. He's taking issue with the fact that the Bills have Keon Coleman miscast in their offense. And we know from the moment they drafted him, Brandon Beane said, he's going to be our X receiver. We think he can be the X receiver in our offense. And that's what he's been, right? Like he's been on the outside for, I think, 93% of the snaps. And this is what Steve Smith has thought about watching him, who, listen, I think I saw a comment here that, Keon's coming on. He had a touchdown last week. He had a touchdown a couple weeks ago. I think he's second on the team in receiving. He's got the most snaps or second most snaps maybe among receivers. But here's the quote from Steve Smith on what he's seen, especially the last 2 weeks and up close in Baltimore 2 weeks ago from Keon Coleman. If you put this young man in the slot against bigger linebackers, against some of them that are not as fast as him in that short area, you give him a chance to really impact the game. Putting him outside an X wide receiver, stationary stand and no motion, and just saying our guy can beat your guy, man, he's not going to do it. Not consistently, not the first day of school. Not like his rookie season. You're setting him up for a really average rookie season, and he's not an average receiver. Thoughts
is I wish we could go back and have a clip from right after the Bills drafted him, because you and I have both said he makes a lot of sense as a big slot option on this team. And obviously he was not going to be their primary slot receiver. They have a lot of other guys. Khalil Shakir plays a lot in the slot too. They have other players that they can utilize there, but why not mix him up and put him there? Give him some, layups, slam dunks, if you want to use some basketball terminology, since he has that basketball background, where he can win those matchups, as Steve Smith pointed out, against linebackers, and utilize his skill set. There were a lot of draft analysts who said he projected best as a big slot in this league. So, I don't think anything he's saying is revolutionary. I think there's a lot of people who have been on board with that, but now it's up to the Bills to actually do it, create those mismatches for him, because as great as that 49-yard touchdown was, where he beat Kamari Lassiter 1-on-1 on the outside, as nice as those 2 sideline grabs have been that he's pulled off this season, where he's boxes the opposition, the cornerbacks out, you want to see a little bit more out of him. There's a lot more to his game. It's up to the Bills to unlock that and let him utilize those other skills, and a lot of that would be coming out of the slot.
The biggest question mark, the biggest criticism that I have for Brandon Beane, and I'm looking forward to the next time we get a chance to talk to him, because I really want to dig into this with him. What was the philosophy when you found Khalil Shakir, who you use predominantly in the slot? And I know we've talked about him in the past as some versatility. Maybe he could play outside. They've never been willing to play him more than 20-ish% outside. So they viewed him as a slot receiver pretty much from the beginning, right? So you get him in the 5th round in 22. Okay. So he's in the mix. He doesn't do much his rookie season, but he's in the mix. He's in the area. Fine. You draft Dalton Kincaid, who in a lot of ways, and we've seen it with the way that he blocks, he's a slot receiver. That's what he is, right? So now you have 2 slot receivers, basically, because he can't really block. You can't line him up in line. And when you put Dawson Knox out there, he becomes that blocking tight end because you're so afraid to put Kincaid in there as a blocker. That's fine. We knew that when they drafted him. Brandon Beane didn't lie about it. We knew this was what they thought of him when they drafted him. So now you have Shakir and Kincaid, and now you turn around in the next draft, and with the first pick that you make, you draft a big wide receiver that is projected to be best playing out of the slot. You can't put 3 or 4 players in the slot. You need some guys that can play on the outside. Yeah. And so now we're talking about this draft capital. They trade Diggs and they add another draft pick. And maybe this is going to be great for 25 and 26 and 27. But man, it is a dangerous gamble, in my opinion, to not prioritize the now with a in your prime elite quarterback when I think they probably could have maybe spent some assets to go up and get maybe a Brian Thomas Jr., who I think fixes a lot of these issues, because now you have players that are supposed to be in the spots that you're putting them.
Yeah. It's like putting a border piece of a puzzle on the inside. It doesn't work, right? They have too many of the same things right now on this offense, and they're hyper focused on making Keon Coleman an X receiver. And there's X receiver parts to his game for sure, but you also have to let him play a little bit on the inside. But the problem becomes you have Khalil Shakir, who is your best receiver, and he's pretty much a slot guy. You have Dalton Kincaid, who not one trick pony is not the right terminology, but he's not a blocking tight end. He is a pass catcher and a pass catcher only. But he adds that extra dimension of the game. But again, as you mentioned, kind of in that role, takes on that slot type of receiver type of role at the tight end. It's too much of the same thing. It's too much of an overlap. And, you know, you can look back and say they didn't plan on trading Stephon Diggs, which I think there's truth to that. They picked up the guarantees. Then they ate $30+ million when they traded him. I think going into the season, initially he was part of their plans, and something changed over the course of the offseason. But the way that they've reacted to that, they haven't done enough to fill in the roles of, you know, what a true, you know, one slot, the two outside, what you want from your tight ends. There's just too much, as I said earlier, of an overlap between a lot of the skill sets of these players.
So here's the thing. Here's the rub. Okay. I think that no matter what happens on Monday night, and I think the Bills can win, and in a lot of ways, pretty much devastate the New York Jets. I mean, if they're not already devastated, I mean, we know, but a win, you know, gets them to 3-3, keeps them kind of in the mix. Who knows? There's still a lot of talent on that roster. But regardless of result on Monday night, I think the Bills need to go out and trade for a wide receiver. You know, I was interested in seeing how this approach worked in practice in the first 4 or 5 games of the season. And I think I've seen enough to where I actually, watching back the game, Ryan, I liked a lot more about Mac Hollins' game against the Texans than I thought I did live. But that's not what he's meant to be. You brought him here to be one part special teamer, one part wide receiver. You can't be a wide receiver one and be the guy that's playing in 4 phases special team. You can't do that in the NFL. And so I think his better role is as that 3rd, 4th, 5th guy who can come in and give you some really good snaps at times, can be used as a blocker as well. But I think you need to prioritize a wide receiver addition. Go out and get a Devonte Adams if the math works out money-wise. Amari Cooper. You know, there's a bunch of names out there that we've talked about over the last couple of days. I talked about it with Antoine Staley, who was on here yesterday. Go check that out if you haven't seen that episode yet. He was awesome. You got to go out and get a guy. And you put up a story just now that the latest report puts the Bills at least in the running for Adams. Although the word out of Las Vegas now is that like everything's fine and he's going to play and be a Raider again. I don't know if that's Antonio Pierce just doing his best PR impression, but man, wouldn't that be wild if after all this they don't trade Devonte Adams?
It would be wild, but you know, we've seen stranger things happen in this league where relationships get repaired. I mean, it just happened with the 49ers leading up to the season with Brandon Ayuk. I mean, everyone thought he was out the door going to Pittsburgh, and then all of a sudden, oh, here's this contract extension. So things can get fixed. The Raiders would have to really start winning, though, I think, for Adams to want to stick around there. But, yeah, the latest report from The Athletic is the Bills are still one of the 4 teams in the mix. For Devonte Adams, obviously, you have the Jets, you have the Saints, both quarterbacks he has played with in the NFL. He's played with Carr before that is 2, obviously. And then the Steelers, who they still want to add to their wide receiver room. Weird things going on with George Pickens. It looked like he was temporarily benched in that game against Dallas, where, you know, talent-wise, he's one of the most talented receivers in this league. It's just there were character concerns about him coming out, and they've kind of reared their head here in Pittsburgh. So they're in the mix than the Bills. But the Bills, it would come down, Matt, to the financials. And every week that goes by, you take about $1 million off of his cap hit. So I think we're around 11 million going into this week. If I'm thinking of it correctly, it was 13 about 2 weeks ago. They still can't afford that and get that under the book. So, but the longer this goes on, let's say it gets down to 8 million, 9 million, then maybe the Raiders are more willing to eat the majority of that salary if the Bills are willing to send a day 2 pick. Because I don't think they're getting a day 2 pick for Devonte Adams without eating a lot of that cap hit because of the age, because of the he wants out type of deal. But the Bills, the fact that they're even still listed as being in the mix tells you that Brandon Beane is at least looking around. He's weighing his options. He's doing what a good GM should do. But you're right. There's other options. There's Amari Cooper, who's much cheaper. The Bills can get him on the books. You could do something with Deontay Johnson in Carolina. Their season seems to be over. You'd have to work around that cap number a little bit. But there are guys that can be had that can be a boost and be that missing piece where they're not maybe a true number one in some of these cases. Like the Deontay Johnson case, but they could at least be that missing piece that's missing the missing element from this offense that they currently need.
Saw a question in here. One of our regulars popping in. Where is that? Did I miss it? Oh no. Oh, Spin over on YouTube. What happened to James Cook? I have the video here. I'm actually going to pull it up. Check out this. Sorry, it's kind of gruesome. Look at that, man. Like slow motion of that.
Yeah.
The front of the foot just absolutely smashing into the turf at Energy Stadium. Yikes. I think this could be potentially a multi-week injury. Just looking at that. He was in good spirits today. He was on the bike off to the side. I think Khalil Shakir doing some testing on the ankle with the trainers, doing some jogging, doing some running, doing some cutting as well is a good sign. Like he's progressing in the right space, but I think we need to see him practicing if we want to, talk about him legitimately getting back. And then you're talking about who are going to replace these guys. And we talked a little bit about it at the top. We'll talk more about it on Friday when we have a little bit better, more clear picture. So the Bills are going to practice tomorrow. They'll be off Friday, but we'll do our preview show that day. And then Saturday, follow us at Matt Parrino, at Ryan Talbot Bills. We'll have you covered on X and any of the platforms with the latest on who's in and who's out. And the best way to find out, we always send it first to the insiders. 716-528-6727. 2-week free trial, $3.99 a month. After that, Taylor Rapp, Ryan, he's out of the red non-contact. He's cleared the concussion protocol. That's some good news because I thought Cole Bishop got better as the game went on. Good first experience for him, but I'm comfortable putting him maybe in the Dorian Williams pot. Good to get him a game there, like Dorian had a year ago, but he may be on the kind of wait and see until year 2 plan. And you hope that Taylor Rapp, Damar Hamlin, maybe we eventually see Mike Edwards. We'll see. I'm also interested to see, Cam Lewis has played pretty well. I don't know if necessarily long-term, if he's a slot answer. He's tried his best in place of Taron Johnson. He's had some good moments, some bad moments. By the way, shout out to him. He had a huge play on that first drive, setting a statement after the Bills went 3 and out. He was the one that got in the backfield for that tackle for a loss to force the punt. Yeah. Back to the Bills, and they just couldn't do anything with it. So I think Cam Lewis has shown pretty well for himself. The Baltimore game, it's just a bad matchup for him. I mean, every time they play a physical run team like that, he's going to be in a tough spot. But Taron Johnson comes back. I'll be interested to see what they do because Damar Hamlin's been up and down, up and down. If they don't like Edwards and they don't like, Bishop, maybe he's not at a spot where they feel comfortable putting him back there. Maybe you try Cam Lewis at safety.
It's a possibility. He has the versatility to do so, and he's an interesting option. I will say I think Damar Hamlin has been more solid than Bills fans will give him credit for. Some, I should say some, because some have. He's always in the right position. He's never out of position. Yes, sometimes you get the bad angle, but I feel like his knowledge of this defense, it shows with the way that he plays. he's been good. Now, ideally, you'd like him to be one of your guys off the bench at playing safety, but for what the Bills have right now, he might be your best option starting opposite Taylor Rapp. But getting Rapp
To your
healthy,
point there, though, before you get on Rap,
yeah,
I think people forget a little bit about Poyer and Hyde sometimes taking bad angles. They
yeah,
both have that in their
for
tape.
sure.
I mean, Derrick Henry, a couple years ago, Micah
Yeah,
Hyde took a bad angle on that.
yep, yeah. There's no doubt. Even the best ones do that. But Taylor Rapp, not to beat up on Cole Bishop, but that long touchdown doesn't happen if Taylor Rapp's in that game. He's always, again, he's another guy. Now that he's in year 2 in Buffalo, he knows where he needs to be. There wouldn't have been that blown assignment. It doesn't mean that Stroud wouldn't have attempted that pass downfield and maybe they wouldn't have connected on it, but it would have been a contested catch. It would have been more difficult to finish in that regard. Bishop did play better as time went on, but I actually like what you said, where give him kind of a red shirt season where, give him some reps here and there, mix him in, but don't throw him into the fire as your starter until he feels comfortable. He missed a lot of time this summer. So whether it's on the back end of the season or whether it's in year 2, let him kind of learn the system. And then when he does know the ins and outs, then you put him out there because the athleticism for a Cole Bishop is off the charts.
Don't look now. I was talking about this with a couple people at Media Day today. Has Dorian Williams' play kind of, I don't know, obviously he hasn't eliminated it, but really quelled the shouts for when is Matt Milano going to be back? It feels like people are like, oh, wait a second. The Bills might have something here with Dorian Williams. And it'll be interesting when Milano gets back, how they work him in, how much he plays. I mean, maybe the Bills can even get real creative, and some of those 3 linebacker looks could be interesting with Williams, Milano, and Terrell Bernard when Milano gets back ready to play. But I think Williams' play and where he's at, if he can stay healthy, puts them in a really good spot. And I know safety, everybody's always talking about, are the Bills going to call Micah Hyde? I think that's a November or December conversation. I don't think he's got a full NFL regular season in him. But I do think that if they call him up in late November, early December, and you're talking about an 8 to 10 week, a little bit of a ramp up, and then 2 or 3 regular season games. And then now all of a sudden you got a playoff run for Micah Hyde, who has done everything in Buffalo except find a way to get this team to a Super Bowl. That'd be an awesome story.
Yeah. And it's funny because we were saying the same thing over the summer. This isn't a guy that's going to be on the roster week 1. It's I kind of said break glass in case of emergency if there's an injury late in the season. But if you need that depth, he will be a great option for this team. But, going back to what we were talking about with the linebackers, if you go against a physical team again and Matt Milano is healthy, that 3 linebacker set, I think would give some cause for excitement between the athleticism, the range, the ability, if you had to run out there with that look at times. That being said, Dorian Williams has looked the part this season. I call it the Terrell Bernard trajectory. Looking lost as a rookie when you're on the field, looking out of place, but come year 2, you see why the Bills were so enthralled with these athletic linebackers. And he is just all over the field making plays, and he recovers the fumble, but he's making run stops. He's getting pressure. He's where he needs to be. I am not advocating for the Bills to move on from Matt Milano when they get the first out possibility in this contract, but there's been some injuries. There's been some missed time the last 2 years now where he's missed big chunks of time. I think the Bills could get by more than okay with a 1-2 punch of Dorian Williams and Terrell Bernard while, still drafting like they have in the last few years, those middle round linebackers. Ulofoshio, I think, with development can be a very solid linebacker in this system. They're still very high on a Balen Spector, and I think he could be a back end of the roster type of linebacker on this team. Who knows about Andreessen, but the way that they draft and develop that position, if they were to move on from Milano in the next year or 2, I would totally get it for the cap savings and the fact that you do have a guy in Dorian Williams who has shown already in year 2 that he is ready for a larger role.
It's going to be a fun rest of the week, Ryan. I can't wait to get to this Bills-Jets matchup. I mean, it feels like an early season, you know, crucial point, right? Like
Yeah.
where, a team can, this Tuesday morning discourse around the Bills, has a chance to be two very different things. With a big win, obviously the trajectory is back on course. If they're able to have their way offensively a little bit with this defense, I think some of the narrative starts to flip. But if it doesn't, the noise is going to get louder. The pressure is going to get, deeper. I put out a quote from Josh Allen today talking about his weapons. He called it a special group. He called it a group that works hard. Guys that those are all great things, right? But in there, I get it being a special group, and you're friends with everybody, you like everybody, but is there a great player in that group? One of these guys has to step up and be a great player, or the Bills have to go out and get a great player if they want to get to where they want to go.
Yeah, 100%. They don't have a great player in that wide receiver room right now, and Josh can say that he likes all these guys, he believes in all these guys, but this is another matchup coming up, Matt, where if you don't have Khalil Shakir out there and you're running Keon Coleman, Matt Collins, and probably not, you might not have Curtis Samuel either. I can't see those guys getting open on any kind of basis. Not, I was going to say regular basis against a Sauce Gardner and a DJ Reed. It's going to be one of those games again where the Bills are going to have to get really creative to win this game. But man, if all these injured players don't play and the Bills find a way to win, what a back-breaking loss that would be for the Jets. I know the Jets have their own turmoil right now. They fired the head coach. The offense has looked absolutely abysmal the last 2 weeks against good defenses. I think the defense of the Bills can create some turnovers and make life miserable for Rodgers. That would just be one of those games, though, where you would sit there and say, okay, the Jets aren't a legitimate threat in the AFC East if the Bills can overcome these injuries. And again, it's Wednesday. We don't know who's going to play and not play on that injury list, but there's a lot of key players on both sides of the ball that the Bills could be missing.
All right, everybody enjoyed the rest of your week. Before we get out of here, Tops Friendly Markets, the official sponsor of the Shout Bills podcast, they got the quarterback blitz going on for a few more days. It runs until October 12th. And you better get ready to score big with Topps Quarterback Blitz. Shop over 25 of your fan favorite brands with your bonus plus and earn a quarterback for each one you buy. There's no limit to the savings you can rack up, score touchdowns with these deals, and keep the savings rolling. Check out topsmarkets.com to see the participating brands. All right, Ryan, be back on Friday. Don't go too far. We'll see you then.
Can't wait.
Take care, everybody.